Cultural workers working in the field, especially in places outside Metro Manila, gets to do things outside his or her expertise. This is how I, a trained interior designer, got to do many things new to me. When I decided to go home to Mindanao in 1992 after completing my studies in Manila. The plan was to break grounds in interior design work in my hometown, General Santos. But things turned out quite different from what was planned. My first paid work was not for an interior design commission. I was asked to choreograph a dance because people heard that I trained with UP Filipiniana back at the university. What I thought was an extracurricular activity at UP became a career in the performing arts. I have not looked back since. I have come to be a founding artistic director of two performing arts groups, the RMMC Halubong Cultural Ensemble, a traditional performing arts group based in RMMC Marbel, and one in Jensan that is active in performance for 20 years now, the multi-awarded Teatro Ambahanon, that group that you saw performing previous to this part of the program. I mentioned RMMC. This stands for Ramon Magsaysay Memorial Colleges, a school in General Santos where I taught for almost 23 years now. The school asked me to teach humanities when CHED required it back in 1998 and when a dean heard that I have an arts background. I was with RMMC as part-time faculty in 1998 and became full-time teacher in 2000. The highest position I held in the academe is Program Chair for Interior Design. This was when Philippine Women's College of Davao borrowed me from RMMC for the period that they cannot find a licensed practicing interior designer to lead the program. I held that position for 9 trimesters. In 1998, I had my first one-man painting exhibit in Cotabato City when an architect friend scheduled me the inaugural show in time for the Gallery Cafe's opening. This was followed by another one-man at the UP Art Gallery in UP Mindanao. Soon after, I was elected Exicom member of the National Committee on Visual Arts of the NCCA, cementing my commitment to cultural work, representing my island cluster in a national committee. But the performing arts sidelined my visual arts practice. My last one-man was in 1992 and only got revived with an invitation from SM to be in my S-City, my SM My Art, as exhibiting artist in 2015. There was a string of group shows and solo shows after, and last year I was featured artist in Mindanao Arts. This May, I will be opening my 7th solo exhibit in Davao. I passed the ID board exam in 1992 and established a thriving but satisfying career in interior design. Busy with a lot of things on my hand, my designing career became just a hobby. But having sat as interior design program chair and currently sitting as chapter president of the Philippine Institute of Interior Designers, I can still say that I am fulfilled in this branch of work as well. All this became background for my cultural work. Occasionally but in full-time capacity, I have been a cultural worker since 1998 when I co-organized the now-defunct Soc-Sargent Arts Council. We in the council hosted many arts festivals when the National Arts Month was still struggling as a national program. For 5 years, we were holding multi-arts festival for NCCA until the NAM became committee-initiated. When SASI folded, community work fell on my shoulders, but this time, Teatro Ambahanon already developed a foothold in the arts, and already I had the support of RMMC, so I continued on. It was providential that I became a theater director. It was providential that I found myself in the academe. It was providential that I became cultural worker and an arts manager. And even in the occasion of this talk, I find it providential that my reactor is Dr. Patrick Flores, a well-respected curator not only in the Philippines but in the museum circles of the world. When I posted on FB about this talk, a friend, architect Gerald Lico, commented, "Mas nakaka-tense si Dr. Flores ang reactor." Indeed, pero I said it's providential. Professor Flores might be persuaded to help with the development of a curator's pool in Mindanao, a challenge that we cultural workers in Mindanao is facing. In more than 30 years since leaving Manila for home, I became an interior designer who is also a painter, theater director, events organizer, cultural worker. What they say about Mindanao as the land of opportunity is valid up to this day. There's a proverb by Desiderius Erasmus that says, "In the land of the blind, one-eyed man is king." This is probably the most true thing ever, and if we look at every situation in life, you will find that it is true. But why do we want one-eyed, or rather less experienced, half-competent cultural worker when this can be addressed with education and proper training? I trained as interior designer, and based on the definition as per current trend, everything now is curated. If my design studies would have to be today, our design teachers would term furniture and furnishing specs as curation. These days, we hear bloggers say curating content. In this vein, my transition to curatorial practice is natural. My approach was, and in the absence of a term, installative. I'm not sure how it's properly called in curatorial theory and practice to select and install. The way we do in our interior design 131, designing for commercial spaces class, where we are taught to display merchandise in stores as if we're displaying artifacts and curiosities that appeals best to the customers. Curators come from many fields of expertise. It's a match made in heaven, so to speak. Art museums spawn curators in the field of the arts, artists, art critics, art historian, history museums from historians, natural science from geologists, botanists. Bigger museum has curatorial teams composed of people from across disciplines working together. Basic curators are to museums and galleries as fish are to water. In keeping with the premise that cultural workers in Mindanao get to learn while doing the job, I did not start curating in the proper channels. Museum. The very first exhibit I curated was during the Soksarjan Arts Council's first Mindanao Arts Festival in Lake Cebu. Working on art pieces bought by artists from all over Mindanao, installing those works in a scenic school campus. It was only later that I would curate for museums. This was followed by another festival with exhibit components in the years we hosted an NCCA National Arts Month event that I work on. Ergo, plain installation of work lang. I was also asked to curate 2 or 3 editions of the Indigenous Peoples Visual Art event organized by a foreign NGO, and a few more I forgot already. In this engagement, I always consider curation as installation of artwork than proper curation. Curation, from what I remember Professor Flores said in that NHIP training, is a critical thinking process. A curator selects pieces to include and remove from the exhibit. I did not have that power in most of the project. RMMC is one of the oldest learning institutions in Soxargen region that has schools in General Santos and Coronadal cities. It's positioning itself as the cultural hub among the private schools in the region and has signed with the Cultural Center of the Philippines as Regional Arts Center. Under CCP's Cultural Exchange Department, kaisa sa sining program of Regional Arts Centers. In 2015, RMMC hosted Kalilangan, a local festival. As host, the school shall manage a festival fund of more than 1 million pesos and funds from sponsorship. As return of investment, the city required a community project from the earnings as festival host. RMMC proposed for a study center with focus on Blaan culture. A museum will be part of this project. RMMC lost in the bidding for the next festival. As a consequence, RMMC lost a secured funding source for the project. The study center was reduced to the capacity of my energy and commitment and a limited resource from the school, but the museum project persisted. The core of the museum's collection are from my personal collection and from the collection of Pia Miliado, the owner of RMMC. Both collections are on loan to the Study Center's museum. Pia began collecting material cultures from the Blaans, Tiboli, Tagakaulo, Teduray, Manobo, and Maguindanao. This collection forms the permanent collection of the RMMC Blaan Center. The museum is unique. It fulfills the function of the museum, collection, preservation, exhibition, and research, but it does not have an exhibition space of its own. To counter the problem of space, most of the exhibits of the RMMC Blaan Study Center are pop-up exhibits mounted in malls, festivals, and schools. This is where we expand our collection, show them to our audience, and for me as curator, a regular practice in the art of curating. And here are the shows that we did in the recent years. From these regular curatorial activities at the Blaan Center, I also managed to get invited to curate in other museums. I did Handurao Marawi for Xavier University Museum. This is an art exhibit celebrating the end of the Marawi siege a year later. Also for Museo de Oro at Xavier University, I did Habing Mindanao, an exhibit of textiles from my collection. For Museo Dabawenyo, I did two exhibits, the Puppets of the World exhibiting the puppet traditions of the world, also from my collection. And I self-curated an exhibit of my works in Indigenous Madonnas, where paintings dialogue with musical instruments. Ongoing now at the Davao Museum of Ethnology and History is another show I curated, The Art of the Malong, showcasing my malong collection and other tube skirts from the Philippines. I also curated for NCCA. For the NCCA Gallery, an exhibit of Kublai Millan's work, and the Textile Pavilion for the Budayo Festival of Culture in General Santos City in 2017 and in Kuching, Malaysia in 2019. I was originally asked to speak on textiles, but I think a lot has been said about that already. And since this is a gathering of Mindanao cultural workers, I find that my journey as cultural worker that eventually led to my discovery of curatorial work a better topic for today. Not because this is an aspect of my work that I feel accomplished about, but a line of work in the arts in Mindanao that is wanting, underdeveloped, in a vacuum. I have come to the part of my talk where I present the opportunities and challenges in curatorial practice. I found myself in this line of cultural work, as I mentioned, because a very few knows how or are willing to try and do it anyways. I don't know the answers as I don't know the questions. For opportunities, I think since it's an almost uncharted territory, the possibilities are enormous. But uncharted territories are also difficult. So let us just focus on two issues. One is the dearth of practitioners, and with that comes the lack of opportunities for professional development, either entry-level training or professional studies. And two, the lack of spaces for curatorial work, meaning kulang ng galleries, kulang ng museums. I know of very few curators in Mindanao. Pam Castrillo of Museo Dabawenyo and Davao Museum of History and Ethnography, Nicolas Aca of the Museum of Tree Cultures of the Capital University, Chris Rolio, a Mindanaoan who is based in Manila, regularly comes to curate for Northern Mindanao. There's quite a few. My guess is there is as many or as few as there are museums and galleries in Mindanao, which only account for one or two per province. Except for Davao that has three or four, many places are still dreaming for one. Again, there are few and fewer still because two curators that I know, Nono Montalban and Abby Garcia, are out of the country at the moment. Nestor Orfilia, who is still recovering from the stroke, and Dr. Erlinda Burton of Museo de Oro passed away a few years ago. If fish are to water and curators are to museums, the other constraint is the lack of avenue for the practice. Do we need to build museums and galleries to create platform? Or there's a few museums because there is no one to run them anyway?